Hello, and welcome to OnSurviving. My name is Megan, and I'm a survivor.
My name is Nobly, and I am a survivor.
Together, we are bringing OnSurviving to the world because it matters.
It matters to me because alongside the potent fears of our frail hearts is so much hurt, loss, and trust issues that I often had to navigate through all alone with very little resources and zero trust. I am passionate about doing this project because I get to be that trusting person, to be there and help with the resources that I never had, and hopefully make a difference in people's process of surviving.
And it matters to me because I want others to recognize the deep strength and rich humanity involved in every step of the process of surviving the tragedies life brings many of us. I suffered silently and alone for too long, and I want to help others to find hope more quickly and readily and feel and be less alone in the process of surviving.
OnSurviving matters. You matter and we matter.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, we get started off just checking in on how we're doing because we show up. Well, shoot, we show up exactly as we are, and try not to put on too many airs. And there are lots of things that can affect how that is. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to share my screen here. Give me just a second, because we check in on these 7 wellness factors. Thinking about a scale of from 5, outstanding, amazing, could be, the best it possibly could be, or lousy, and really about the worst it could be. So, hey, Nobly, why don't you start us off today, checking in on how you are on each of these?
Okay. Physical, about a 3. My knee's been really bad this week, and I've been more active, but it's been hurting a lot. Intellectual, say a 4. I've been learning new things and, trying to do more research and learn more things, go deeper into the learning, which is cool. Ironically, with the topic and everything, emotional is horrible because I have to take, bipolar medication and depression medication, and most all of my medications are on auto refill. And so I do my, meds up in a 7-day planner, and I don't really pay attention to the bottle much, except for when I'm, loading my thing. Anyway, long story short is I ran out of my bipolar med. Oh. and was out of it for like 4 days, and I was a mess. And then my pharmacist couldn't. It took 2 days after I realized that I didn't, have any to get some, and so it just really affected me a lot. And my spiritual self kind of suffered too as a result of that, because I was really funky. Environmental was okay, like a 3. Social, the work aspect of it and the coworker, the office aspect of it was good, because it has to be. But my personal self, I isolated. And occupational is really good. I'd have to say that one would be a 4 or 5, because I love my job, and I also absolutely love doing this. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the last part's awesome, and other good parts in there too. I'm curious about the meds part. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second so we can chit chat. Does it take, when you don't take it for a day or a few days or something like that, does it take a while for it to start working again, or does it have other effects?
Yeah, it does. This one particular one, you're never supposed to just abruptly get off of it because of this very reason. And what it does is it makes you like so sad, like just like the saddest. And it physically makes you feel weird, shaky and just clammy and out of sorts.
Right.
And I'm on the maximum, dose and stuff. And so then when you finally do get it, you have to gradually work yourself back up to it. You can never start at the dose that you have. And so after the 4 days of not having it, then I had 4 days of a fourth of the dose that I'm supposed to have. And then, we're talking like 8 days later, I'm feeling better.
Wow.
And so it's a really, it's not good.
Yeah.
So.
Are there ways to prevent that from happening when, I it seems like it could be a system failure, and I'm just curious if there's a way to that could be better.
I think there is, because there has to be, because in the past, my Oregon health plan lapsed, for whatever reason. I don't remember. Maybe they didn't have the right address, didn't fill it out or whatever. But so when it was time to get my mental health medications, I went to get them and I had no coverage. And I couldn't get the letter to tell me you have no coverage because I was, couch surfing or whatever.
Right.
And so I had no medication. So I had to scramble and try to find somebody to help me fill out the app and try to get, and it was 2 weeks. I want to say closer to 3 before I was able to get my medication. And during that time, I did have some suicidal ideation,
I feel like we should. This is a big topic, and what comes to mind is people who are living with unstable housing or completely unhoused, living on the street, and happens to be a pretty high rate of people struggling with mental health issues, and to not be able to have reliable access to your medication is a big
crucial
deal. Yeah. Okay. Well, so noted. We can maybe even, maybe we even, that comes up more in our conversation and when our guest joins us.
Yeah, so, you betcha.
So
how are you?
Yeah. So, how am I? All right. Well, let me let me share my screen again so I can. Okay. Physically, physically, I'm actually doing okay. I haven't been exercising as much with my move. For folks who don't know, I just moved back to the States about 4 days ago. And so I've been, moving around a lot because of that move, but I haven't had my reliable yoga practice that I normally do in the morning. So I'm just a little bit off because of that physically, but not too bad. Intellectually, I'm going to go ahead and put that at, you know what? I'm going to put it at a 3. I'm going to go 3 emotional, 3 spiritual, 3 environmental, 3 social, and 3 let's just 3s all down the board, because largely affected by this move. And I've been, I wanted to stay where I was, and I was very much in love with it. And and I'm counting my blessings for the fact that I keep getting to do this. This is just absolutely a wonderful high part of every week. All the different parts I get to work on with OnSurviving. But I gave my occupational a 3 because everything's just kind of out of balance right now. I'm not able to do as much of the things that I love. I actually still have one lingering consulting project, which is actually a pretty cool project, but it takes away. And so basically all of the factors in here have something to do with that move, except for the social piece. I had a a recent, because of me trying to put things in balance in my life, I decided I needed to make a change in one of my business, one of my side hustles.
Yeah.
Which is with a really important friend to me, and that friendship is a little bit on the rocks at the moment because I'm chose to take care of myself, and to prioritize the things that I said I was going to prioritize for now, which is my writing and healing. And I just realized I was stretching myself too thin. And this move and coming back here, I'm just like, I don't want to waste this opportunity. Things change. I have a real opportunity here. And so I fully believe I'll be back on the upswing as we go forward. I'm just happen to be we're here at a time that really this is the best I felt in 5 days, probably. It's been a rough go.
Sorry.
It is what it is. There has been worse, and I'm very grateful to be here with you, and very grateful that our guest will be joining us, and which brings me around to what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about our experiences with mental health systems, what's been helpful and not, plus some ideas that could make mental health systems even more helpful. And of course, as always, I want to remind folks that we speak candidly about our experiences, and that can be triggering for some folks. So if you're dealing with some, tough trauma or other kinds of struggles with mental health issues, we just really want to encourage you to take care of yourself and to know that you can turn this off. You can go hug a loved one. You can get on the phone and call a crisis line. If you just want to talk to somebody and you're uncomfortable talking to maybe a stranger. So on that note, let me just go ahead and share my screen one more time so that y'all remember that you are not alone and that you matter. And if you're struggling, we really want you to reach out. And if for some reason, like I said, if somebody, you feel like you don't have somebody, you can't go to people that you know, or you just want to talk to a stranger because you don't want to have, any guard up around what you're saying, crisis lines are available anytime for free, wherever you are. In the United States, just dial 988. In Mexico, my former home, dial 800-911-2000. And you can go on Wikipedia. There's a list of crisis lines, suicide hotlines for all sorts of countries around the world if you're coming to us from there. So please do take care of yourself, reach out. If you want to listen some more, you can come back and maybe listen with a buddy. So with that, let's go ahead and start with our experiences before we bring on our guest. And I think I'm getting us started here today. Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to actually start by just reading a really, really brief paragraph. For folks who may not already know, we do write blog articles on the theme that we're talking about. And so just briefly, this paragraph I wrote toward the beginning of mine says, I spend a lot of time talking and writing about my aggravation with people asking me, have you gotten counseling? That question and others like it feel like people are trying to get me to shut up, go off into a private corner to talk about these uncomfortable, sometimes horrifying things. And sometimes I want to cry with someone who loves me, feel less alone with this horror in the world. Sometimes I need the people in my daily life to understand what is burdening me. Sometimes I just need a break. And sometimes, though, I truly need professional guidance. And I want to, that is super true for me through much of my life. In fact, at least as early as 11 years old, I was in need of mental health care because of childhood sexual abuse I experienced at that age. And then, of course, over time, other experiences, other traumatic experiences layered on top of those, and made my need for help even more significant over time. Though, as I've written about in a number of things and talked about a couple of times, my very first experience with counseling at 11 was horrifying. And where it was a really bad counselor who asked me if I liked it when I was abused. And then again, I didn't get care again until quite some time later. But you know, I guess, and I actually want to go through some of the array of things that I've been through, and that I talk about in that piece. But first, I did want to point out that when I'm talking about needing care myself, I am talking about a wide variety of issues. I have a few key diagnoses that I have needed treatment for. One is post-traumatic stress disorder from that childhood abuse, which actually was compounded then by sexual assaults when I was a teenager in high school by peers. And then again, I had a new PTSD diagnosis after the accident that I was in with my daughter that took her life. And then, as with all of that, diagnosed with major depressive disorder and panic disorder. And interestingly, I was actually reflecting on some of my early experiences. So, like, the first point I was making, I think the really kind of takeaway when I'm thinking about mental health systems and my experiences with them is that at some really key points, they were absolutely critical. It was critical for me to be in therapy. It was critical to me that the crisis line was there. It was critical to me that there was a psychiatric hospital that was able to give me the care that I needed, especially at that very, very early, that first, not the 11-year-old encounter, but my next encounter wasn't until I was 19. I think I was really both scared off of working with a counselor because of that experience at 11, but also just societally, it was like something was really wrong with you if you were going, that's how it felt to me anyway, if you're going to reach out for care. And and at 19, I was having massive panic attacks and I had no idea what was happening to me, what was going on with me, or why. I had major depression. And I attempted suicide. And luckily someone found me and got me to the hospital. And of course then was on a 72-hour hold as required by law. And luckily had some really wonderful people there who were able to help me understand, I think, the basics that of what was happening to me. And I really wanted to and really should have gotten more care from there. I'll talk about that actually in a minute. But I also wanted to talk about a couple of other times when it was really critical for me, and it really saved my life. So that next point was then again after after Jasmine died, after the accident, I couldn't close my eyes, whether, like a long blink or trying to sleep at night without seeing my daughter's body floating down the, I mean, or hearing my screams. It was so horrifying. And so obviously I'm still a little, this is that level 3 showing up where my, I get choked up. Anyway, so EMDR, was a treatment that used for PTSD, both for my childhood sexual abuse, as well as for after the accident, and really helped me to be able to engage life, at least get me to relatively to zero, right? And helped me to be able to move forward from there. The next time that I really my life was in danger was actually when I had started drinking and abusing drugs really heavily after Jasmine died. And I when I did quit later, things got really bad, because then all of a sudden I had to face everything without a crutch. And by the way, I realized sometime later that I was abusing drugs and alcohol prior to that, also as a part of a crutch, trying to, deal with, avoid dealing with all of the other trauma that I had previously. So when I was no longer using, everything was really there. And by then, I had burned some bridges and folks weren't super psyched about being there for me. So I was really alone. And unfortunately, at that point in time, I didn't have health insurance. But crisis line I mentioned before, it was everything to me. I called a lot. Luckily, I was able to actually go see somebody in person, who is also a crisis counselor at a crisis clinic near me. And so it was a wonderful thing that those were available to me at that time. Now, there have been other times when I have been in some kind of therapy, including recently. I've been finally able to do that grief counseling that I should have been doing after EMDR for my daughter's death. And frankly, I should have been doing more of that kind of work early on in my 20s as well. But I have finally really found a therapist I work really well with, and I feel like really hears and it gets me and is able to help me. Of course, that raises all sorts of stuff to the surface, so it can have an impact on daily life. You can feel a bit more raw, and so that's even when there's great therapy. And of course, there's other things like the hospitalization, which was really quite traumatic of its own right. Being strapped to a gurney for hours without people talking to you or letting you know what's going on is in and of itself quite terrifying. And so I guess what I want to say about that, though, is not as in, oh, you bad mental health system, but to I mean, there's a number of things system wise that I think that the system, especially our emergency mental health care systems, can do better. Honestly, even that ongoing system where, people have challenges with access to care, I think there are things we can do better.
Yeah.
But I guess when I'm talking about this part where therapy has been almost as traumatic as the original trauma at times, is that I want to impress upon our personal support systems how important it is for you to be there for your loved one that is suffering. And so when you're saying, hey, Nobly, if I'm saying, hey, Nobly, I really hope I'd really think it would be helpful for you to see and talk with a counselor about that, somebody who really understands, what you're going through and can help you work through it and give you some good tools. Great.
Right.
That's all good. And I want to encourage, someone like me to say also, and hey, let's plan a regular coffee, or let's, to just show up and just plan to be there as a regular support.
Yeah.
So that to me just feels that helps kind of bridge that gap and that part that we just know yeah, therapy's good. And you know what? It's hard. And so we need our loved ones to be there with us too.
Yeah.
Um, a couple of points I just want to make quick. In my experiences where I have there have been some points like right at following that 19-year-old suicide attempt, as well as after I got through EMDR after Jasmine died. In both of those circumstances, I did not have health insurance. And so, and I was in, when I was 19, I was in college. Shortly after that, I was pregnant. I was paying for college by myself. I was working my way through it. I barely had enough money to get by. I certainly did not have enough to pay for therapy. And then later, after Jasmine died, and I was no longer getting employment with health insurance, I also just wasn't in a place to be able to pay for that ongoing care. And so that, and it is expensive. And I think we as a society should, and could do better there. Because that's just, that is a major gap. One thing I do want to say is I want to see more places be like the state of Colorado, which has a program called I Matter. And that offers up to 6 free counseling sessions for young people 18 and under, and actually 21 and under if receiving special education services. So, and I tell you what, if that was available to me, that might have changed just about everything in my life. So, yeah, anyway, we could definitely use more access. Mental health care shouldn't be just available for people who have money. That's a big gap. And then I guess the last thing I want to say, there's a couple more points in the piece that I wrote, but I'm going to save them. I think for now, what I just want to say is that in my experience over the years, when I have reached out to find some kind of therapy, there's all sorts of different kinds of care, mental health care you might be able to access on an ongoing basis. And it's, and it can be kind of hard to find the right fit. So I always encourage my friends and, others that I talk to interview and to, do your best to think about what it is that you need, what will be helpful for you, and to, read about, do a search online, but also call and, and actually interview that potential therapist. Right. So, so you can get as close as possible. And even then still, there may not be the right fit, and just encourage folks to keep going back, and to work through it and to have the courage to make that change when it's not the right fit. And also sometimes to look at alternative things. Like I have, especially in these later years, found mind body work, meditation, especially guided meditation, and yoga to be an important part of my mental health. Shoot, I am feeling, as I said somebody earlier, about the baddest, toughest, I don't know, amazing me than I've probably ever felt in my life. And I'm going through some shit right now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that said, Nobly, what the heck? Where, tell us a little bit about your experiences.
Um, I should have had, like you, I should have had, therapy as a kid, some form of counseling. I had, trauma that started from a very young age, but I had 4 traumatic events. I'm Native American, and I was raised in that culture, and we are taught from a very young age that you just don't tell anybody anything. And so counseling, even after my brother was murdered as a child, wasn't even brought up one time. It just wasn't something that was ever an option. And so I had 4 traumatic events before the one that I start my piece with, that should have also, I should have had some form of therapy or counseling for those events that, again, it was just never even brought up. And then I start my piece talking about how I was sexually assaulted at 13 and my virginity was taken, and I literally had nobody to talk to. I've never felt so alone or, scared in my life. I just had nobody to talk to at all. And so as a result of that, I just started acting out in other ways, experiencing with drugs and alcohol, running off, ditching school, all of those things. And nobody, took the time to find out, why I was doing that. It was just like, she's a bad kid. She's a loser. She don't run around with her. She's bad news, until I had a suicide attempt, not too long after the sexual assault. And even right after, of course I got taken to the Native clinic and all of that. But even after that, I felt shame. I was shamed either by my parents saying, my dad saying, what is wrong with you? To the parents saying, don't ever hang around her, to people going, what a weirdo, and so instead of getting the help I needed, I got shamed. And, again, nobody took the time to find out why, what's wrong. And so finally, after a while of that, I got sent to a counselor for the very first time. And it was a Native American counselor. And she had known my dad, probably knew my grandpa, I don't know, but knew me from, little. And she broke every single bit of confidentiality that she possibly could. She told my dad everything that was said. And as a result, she ruined me for ever wanting to trust a counselor. And not to mention, my dad was livid, just livid at me. And so it was already that there was already a tension there, now it's like, it's even worse.
Yeah. Can I just say, can I ask you, as I listen to that part of your story, Nobly, I'm struck by the fact that, if you're Native American, African American, if you are a person of color, it's oftentimes really hard to find a really great counselor who understands that your culture, and you don't have to get through this big cultural barrier to even begin to like take care of your human needs that you're showing up for. And I'm just and it strikes me at what a devastation that would be, that you should be getting some good care here, and unfortunately that closeness helped, with your father, made it just such an opposite experience. Have you thought about that much, and has that changed how you think about going to therapy? I'm just curious about what that effect was.
That ruined me for years,
Mhm.
for years and years and years and years. I didn't trust anybody, and in between the years, between when that happened at 13 and when I finally got some help after my second suicide attempts, like in my 20s. So much more happened, so many more traumatic events happened, and it was like I don't, two more suicide attempts, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it took so much for me to even go in there, and it was pretty much, the hospital that was like, you need to go to, such and such county health right when you leave here, you know what I mean? And so again, I agree with you. The first three, I didn't feel like they gave two shits about me. I felt like they had never been through what I had been through, and they were looking at their book going, yeah, I just felt no love, zero love. So then it was when, tried to go through those three, totally turned off again. And in between all of this, I developed a substantial substance abuse problem, like the worst it could probably be for me. And so then I heard things like, oh, it's the dope, or she's a druggie, or, it's like blaming it on the substance abuse, when that wasn't it at all. It was all the mental health that I needed help for that I never got, that caused me to self-medicate.
Right.
All the trauma in between, but it was labeled as, that I was an addict and a lost cause, but nobody. And that was before I had my diagnoses of bipolar 2 and manic depressive and severe anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. And so at that time, all that was going on. I didn't know. Didn't get any mental, health help. So I did eventually, after my son passed as an infant. It was still 2 or 3 years after that, but I started to get people. I was on the streets and nobody wanted to even look me in the eyes, let alone, let me in their establishment to dry off, let alone try to let me have a conversation with them to tell them where I was.
Mhm.
And I went to, I did go to a homeless shelter, and I was met there with love and everything, but there were so many people in there, so many, residents in there that needed the love, and that there just wasn't enough people to go around. And, I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but it seems appropriate now. I think it would be so amazing if retired counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists could volunteer their time to go into these mental hospitals and be readily available, so many times a week, or whatever, and be there for the residents of the shelter. Because that's something that would have impacted me tenfold. Like that would have been a complete game changer in my life. Already felt like nobody loved me. I was separated from my family. I just, that would have been a game changer. So I just think that would be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, I'll say really quickly that I did work
yeah,
with a community. I won't say which one, but I did work with a community once on homelessness issues, where there were some individual retired counselors who actually went and showed up at a regular place where people who are unhoused or very unstably housed would be on a daily basis, just to provide that good human contact. And it was incredibly valuable, but they were like, we have to keep it on the down low because we're not actually allowed to do this. And that is just that needs to be fixed. Like, that's just such an easy fix, that there should be no barrier to doing that. People who know what they're doing, to be able to volunteer their time in that way is is incredible. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interject again.
No, I'm glad that you did. And then I'm sorry, I kind of got to just peek at my notes really quick, but what did work for me was, obviously a good counselor, therapist, being on the right medication, which I often felt like a guinea pig.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't feel good when you're trying to figure out what the right one is. But I just encourage people to, to stick with it if that's what you need for your mental health. Because for me, it's really good now.
Yeah.
And that takes that's a huge part of it right there. As you can tell, as in my wellness check-in, that it's not good for me when I don't have it.
Yeah.
And then I, on my third suicide attempt, overdosed on heroin shortly after my son was died. And I was dead. I took a couple things of Narcan. I'm such a survivor of that, or a supporter of that, because I wouldn't be here. So if you go to your local pharmacy and ask for Narcan, they will give you one. It's really easy to use. I just encourage people to have that in case they come across somebody that is, overdosing.
Yeah.
And then
anybody can have that, right?
Anybody can have it. Yes.
Yes.
And with the opioid and the fentanyl, epidemic, like I have, and plus the job I work, but I have 4 just in my car.
Awesome.
And so, and then the understanding of my community that I live in, and my family, and just anybody that comes across me, again, we don't know other people's struggles. And
right.
So who are you to be mean or judgy or hurtful or shameful, or especially shameful? Yeah. Don't ever. Yeah. I don't care who you are. Yeah. And then the biggest one for me, this one is something that you already mentioned, but is follow-up. You got to follow up, because often after the suicide attempts and after the immediate hospitalization, like it was like it never happened. Nobody checked on me. Nobody, nobody followed up. Nobody ever once was like, like you said, like, I want to make a special day for you, or what can I do for you? What would you like to do to make you feel better in your mind and your heart with your mental health? What is something? Do you want a teddy bear? Do you want a weekly coffee meet? Do you want a hug, a text, a heart, anything? Yeah. It just didn't happen. And that is so critical because it goes far beyond the event itself.
For sure.
It goes far beyond. And so that is like the main thing for me. Is the follow-up, and the follow-up may not look like 2 days later. It may look like 7 months later. It may look like, there's no time. Yeah, here we are. You know what I mean? I still want checked on, I mean, honestly. So, I just, one more point too, is that, I had that experience with the counselor on the reservation that I grew up on, that my father still resides on. My father's had extreme trauma, the murder of his only boy, like on and on. And it took him 75 years to seek any kind of help because of his culture and his, tradition. 75 years.
Wow.
Until recently, well, it's been a year or so now, he bucked up and went to seek some help.
Awesome.
And this same place where I was my experience, well, he found a wonderful, wonderful therapist. It's paid for by the tribe. He's an elder, as should be, with extreme confidentiality. And for this man who is about like telling me about it. So awesome. So my heart is overflowing, because all of those little me's that are running around there now have somebody. So that's amazing to me.
That's beautiful. It is never too late.
No, it's not. So, I mean, and the other thing is too, if you're, so I just real quick, I had a couple incidences lately. I work with families that I'm family preservation, which needs such a wide array of help. And I would say 3/4 of them, if not even more than that, need mental health help. Most of them are poverty level, right? Most of them depend upon the state insurance. And this particular mom and her 11-year-old daughter that both have had substantial trauma. Anyway, I have been on the phone, I'm talking for 5 weeks now. Wow. Trying to find somebody that had openings for a child and a mother individually and together who had state insurance. It took 5 weeks to finally find one. And then their appointment was scheduled 2 months out. So that is so bad. And then the second, I think something's got to be different on that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, and sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say our guest tonight has, I think, some stuff to say about that too. But I don't want to cut you off. So
no, I can't wait to introduce her. She's wonderful and she has so much wonderful things to say. And this very last thing I wanted to say too was my young adult nephew was stabbed himself in the heart not too long ago and was hospitalized. And there was in this entire state of Oregon, which is where I live, there was not a bed. So for 3.5 weeks, he sat in the emergency room of this tiny hospital and he just sat there. And so anyway, I'm really excited to bring on the guest too, but I just want it to be easier for everybody of every race, every class, every
income level,
every situation. I just want it to be easier. So.
Yeah. Which is why we talk about these things. I think we find solutions in community the same way we find healing in community. And I loved that, that thinking about like even years later, somebody to come check on you. And our guest tonight happens to be one of my oldest friends. And one of the people who most reliably checks in with me on my daughter's birthday every year. I love her dearly, and I'm so happy she's here with us. Her name is Christina Hallberg. She's also the author of The Violet Testament, her personal memoir and story of surviving her own major childhood trauma and living with bipolar 1 disorder. Chris, please do join us and say hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina. Before I announce myself, I'd like to acknowledge that Megan Picard and Lauren Jarvis are the editors of the Violet Testament, and I really appreciate their work on this.
Oh, that's sweet. Of course, I only got to do some of the early work on it, but really happy.
You changed the beginning of the book, so it was better. So anyway, this conversation matters to me because the mental health and criminal justice systems have failed me many times. The things that have happened to me should never happen to anyone. Sometimes people will say, you don't want to be a victim. Don't be a victim. You want to be a survivor. Well, I'm both. I'm quite clearly a victim, but I'm also a survivor. I look forward to the dialogue today. I've had a lot of trauma in my life, beginning from when I was a small child and dealing with my father's paranoid schizophrenia. So there was a lot of chaos in my life during that time. I've been playing violin professionally ever since high school. I have a BA in psychology from the University of Puget Sound, where I was concertmaster of the orchestras there. I was also concertmaster of the Seattle Philharmonic Orchestra for 5 years, and that was a really fun gig. I wanted to give you the backstory behind my pen name, Elisa Gold. Elisa, because Elisa is my middle name. It's also a form of Alice, I believe the Russian form. There's an Alice in Wonderland theme that runs through the book, because it's like losing one's mind is like falling down the rabbit hole. So that's why Elisa, because it's connected to Alice. What else? Interestingly enough, Alice in Wonderland's initial title was Alice's Adventures Underground. So I actually have a hard copy from a long time ago of the original. So it's been really cool. And then gold, just because I wanted something symbolic and simple. So I think I've had PTSD pretty much my whole life, but I was diagnosed with a severe case of bipolar 1 disorder just after my 30th birthday. And this was really heartbreaking for me, because my entire life I had this fear that I was going to end up crazy like my dad. So that was a lot to deal with. But these days, my psychiatrist has deemed my bipolar disorder in partial remission, because I have not had a relapse in 7 years. I've been getting back into the violin. I have 4 wonderful students. A few more things about me. I'm a cat mom, and I have 2 precious little babies. Cats and music are my best medication. I haven't had a drink in almost 3 years. And my favorite food is Indian. And my 2 most favorite artists in the entire universe are Chris Cornell and Prince. So
love. And I was really hoping you were going to mention the kitties, because they are super important.
They are. They're my kids.
Yeah. And I refer to my cats as my therapy cats.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Emotional support animals.
For real. Oh, nobly, I muted us both because we were having noise in the background, but I know that you were wanting to get in here to ask Chris a further. No. Okay. So I will go ahead then. Really just excited for you to show up. One of the things I always brag about you is what an amazing talent you have as a violinist. And it is so exciting to me to hear you play again, and to know that you're teaching lessons again. Those kids are super lucky.
Thanks.
Seriously, so lucky. So yeah, so that's super awesome. Of course, we've invited you here to talk with us about your experiences with the mental health system.
Yeah.
And you told us a little bit why that's important to you. I'm curious if you will help folks. I think not everybody probably understands what bipolar 1 disorder is. So wondering if you can just kind of tell us a little bit about that. And of course, we heard Noble Lee earlier mention that she lives with bipolar 2.
Right.
So I'm wondering if actually both of you might help folks to understand those 2 diagnoses a little bit more before we go into more.
Bipolar disorder is a serious mood disorder that affects one's mood and their ability to function. There are 2 poles, depression and mania, hence bipolar. Bipolar 1 tends to be, actually I forgot to say, bipolar disorder is a spectrum disorder. It's a group of disorders that affect one's mood. Bipolar 1 tends to be more debilitating than bipolar 2. Nobly, did you want to chime in on the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2?
I don't know too much about bipolar 1, but for my understanding, for bipolar 1, the mania is far more extreme, and it lasts far
Last
more
one.
way
Yeah.
longer. I was told by the therapist that diagnosed me, was the reason why that I was bipolar 2 was because my manic highs and lows, that didn't last, maximum of like 4 days at a
See, yeah,
time.
yeah, and bipolar
And
1 episodes can last for months and sometimes
yes,
require hospitalization. So I guess
right.
if you have to have bipolar disorder, you'd probably want bipolar 2.
Yes, yes.
I'm the
Yes.
lucky one.
Well, I feel for you and my sister, and so many others that have the bipolar 1, because it like you said,
It's debilitating.
it is absolutely debilitating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So, and when you talk about it being debilitating, of course, you have bipolar diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder in remission now, but it looks different on different days,
Right.
right? Whether, how it's showing up. Can you tell us just a little bit about how that shows up? Maybe a couple of different ways it might show up in your life, or how
The
what you
bipolar disorder.
manage. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're digressing from the discussion guide. So let me just take a second here. Okay. So in terms of bipolar symptoms, I don't really struggle day to day so much with bipolar symptoms anymore, now that I finally found the right medication, which took 13 years. Um, I think the most thing that I struggle with today is adjusting to normal moods. For 13 years, I hadn't experienced a normal mood. So now sometimes when I get depressed or anxious, I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna get depressed again, or I'm gonna have a panic attack. So it's getting used to the fact that they're normal moods. And then once I feel that way, the mood will eventually pass, and then I feel fine. Whereas when I was depressed, I never felt okay. An example of a really bad day for me is something that happened just a few weeks ago. I'm very uncomfortable around the police because I've had several traumatic clashes with them where they manhandled me and terrified me. And so I'm just very uncomfortable with that. And the other day I went to 7-Eleven, it was a few weeks ago, to get something, and I was standing in line. Well, a cop walked in, and he was very big. He was a tall man. He was tall and muscular. And he proceeded to stand directly in line behind me. And my reaction was visceral. Like my heart was pounding, my mind was racing. It was fight or flight. I was like, I think I was really nervous, especially because he was standing behind me. And the reaction was so strong that I almost got out of line. But what I did is just sort of did deep breathing, and then I was rung up, and then I made it out of there. But that's an example of a really bad day, because that trigger would throw me off emotionally for about a week.
Wow.
So it's, I need some help dealing with my triggers, which I'll mention later. But
well, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when you're raising there, it's a really good example of that trigger and that response and impact. And of course, I know why that trigger comes up. The next question I was going to ask you, if there are other parts of your life that are also difficult for you and your sense of mental or emotional well-being on an ongoing basis. And I know that, that some of what you've just talked about is related to those things. So I wonder if you would want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Can you restate the question? Sorry.
Yeah. Other things other parts of your life that you're dealing with, not just, not purely about bipolar 1 disorder, but other things that you're dealing with that are part of your story, that whether you've gotten it or not, that you could use mental health care for.
Okay. So the facets of my story that I think I could really benefit from mental health support would be to find a good trauma counselor who specializes in PTSD. I could use some help with my triggers, especially surrounding the police. I can also deal with, I could stand to deal with a lot of the childhood trauma. Right now, I'm going to give an example of what my childhood looked like in the chaos. So it was a Sunday, and I was about 5 or 6, probably about 5. And my mom and dad and I were going to the grocery store because my dad wanted to get aspirin because he thought the aspirin at home had been tampered with. So he was paranoid that day, and I was bracing myself for the worst. So we go into the store. He was walking ahead of us, and we were, behind him. And all of a sudden, my mom grabs my hand and starts running out of the store. He's running after us. I get to the wrong side of the car. My mom screams my name. And when your mom screams your name in terror like that, it makes your blood run cold. So I froze for a second, but then I ran over to the right side of the car. We got in the car and we started driving off. Well, my dad jumped on the hood of the car. So my mom did kind of like a movie maneuver where she accelerated and then slammed on the brakes, and then he flew off the car. And then I think after that, we had gone to my church or our church or something. But that's a prime example of stuff that happened to me when I was really little. It was very scary.
Right. And you share that story and other related stories from your childhood in your book.
Yeah.
Which is really great.
And dealing with the police. Yeah.
Well, and I know this particular episode isn't about law enforcement systems. I do think, nobly, that we should have an episode talking about that, because we do know so much in US communities anyway. So often law enforcement are responding to situations that are actually mental health situations and end up going through courts and jail system and, the whole criminal system, when it's actually should be in a healthcare system. And that's part of your story, Chris. So I know we don't want to spend a ton of time there, but I do think it's an important part of your mental health story. So if you would want to just share a little bit, and you don't have to either. So it's up to you if you want to share that or not.
Okay, let me just share more about, share more about what?
About the this part of your story that has the negative interactions with law enforcement, the reason that you're having that PTSD response to the officer behind you.
Well, I don't want to give the whole book away, so I won't give details about the experiences I've had with the police, but I talk about it extensively.
Yeah.
This is sort of towards the end of the discussion guide, but I thought it might be okay to bring it up here.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that would be ideal is when someone with serious mental illness is taken to jail, that the mental health system responds right away and intervenes.
Mm-hmm.
In 2014, I was sitting in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day for 2.5 weeks before I was even evaluated. They kept me another 8 weeks in solitary confinement before they transferred me to a hospital. This is not only inexcusable, it is criminal. And, this is a prime example of the disconnect between the mental health and the criminal justice systems, and I paid the price. So it'd be really great if there were more coordination and communication between both the mental health and criminal justice systems.
Yeah.
But that's about, all I wanted to say about that. That's a whole nother topic for another discussion.
Yeah.
So
and hopefully you'll come back and talk with us more about that, because you do have a powerful story there. So now coming back to two mental health systems that we're talking about here today. I talked earlier about my own mixed experiences dealing with mental health systems. I certainly know the same is true for you. And want to take a moment here to talk about what has been good. What has been in your experience? What has been helpful for you? Like I mentioned, EMDR being helpful. One thing actually I didn't talk about earlier, but I did write about was important, was that I actually got to see the same therapist for different treatments. And that was immensely helpful because I didn't have to start from ground zero in trying to then work on a new issue, right? Because I had already seen and gone through EMDR with that therapist on my childhood trauma. And that same therapist actually saw my daughter when I was separating from her papa. And then that same therapist she knew us. And then when Jasmine died, was there to care for me. So, just how invaluable that was. So I feel so lucky. So anyway, huge thing that was powerful for me. And then of course I also mentioned these mind body practices that have been helpful for me. So with that, what kinds of things have been helpful for you in your experiences with mental health systems?
Well, with all the negative experiences, it's a little difficult to find the positives sometimes, but one, I can think of two. One is my first psychiatrist treated me for 10 years. She was my psychiatrist and my counselor. And it was really nice to have that consistent quality care. She was someone that the hospital could call, who could advocate for me, who knew me and my history and all that. And that was a good thing to have that consistent care for so long. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2013, and so I lost that lifeline. The second example of something helpful was back in 2016. Again, I was scrambling to find a psychiatrist who would take Medicare. It's been a recurring theme. I write about it a lot. Anyway, so it was a mad scramble to find a provider who could give me my meds. So I ended up finding a free clinic. And there was this nurse practitioner there named Katie. And she was really kind and supportive and everything. And she would make a medication change that would transform my life. She put me on Latuda. Latuda, for the very first time in my life, eradicated my depression.
Wow.
And it's really interesting because Latuda is not an antidepressant. It's an atypical antipsychotic that's used to treat bipolar depression and schizophrenia. So this was really an amazing experience with Katie because she actually did something to actually help me. So unfortunately, here we go again. Unfortunately, the clinic lost funding and had to close. So then I had to look for another provider. But I would say those are probably the two positive ones.
And that last one must have been life-changing.
It was. It was like when I talk about this in my book, when I stopped being depressed and felt good and happy, I was like, oh no, I'm getting manic now. But it really
like you couldn't even trust it.
Yeah, I was really suspicious. I was like, I'd call my mom and I'd be like, Mom, do I sound manic? And she'd be like, no, you just sound normal. And I'm like, okay.
Well, and actually that you mentioned your mom too. I know we don't always think about our personal support systems as being part of our mental health care, but I can't stress enough how much, I really think that is so. And yeah. I happen to know what an amazing support your mom was for you throughout this whole path.
She was my rock.
Amazing.
She was my rock. And interestingly enough, tomorrow's her birthday. She would have been 75.
Happy birthday, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a picture. I have an 8.5 by 11 picture just to the left of my screen of my mom. So I figured that would help me not be so nervous.
Do you want to show us?
I don't know if I can here.
Honor Mom. Mom passed away recently. Oh, beautiful Mom. Oh, happy birthday.
So good.
Okay. So appreciate that. Nobly, anything else you want to chime in?
I just, well, I'm in awe by everything, not in awe, but like everything that Christina's, she's gone through all of this stuff and she's had all these barriers and all this trauma. And one of my questions, was going to be like, how are you doing now? And it makes me so happy to hear that, that you're in remission and you still go through things, but it's not to make light of anything that you're going through, but how much hope that you spread by your story and by letting people know that despite all of that, look at you, like you're beautiful, you're successful, like you have this amazing book, and that you're here with us to share all of that, to just even to reach one person. I have like goosebumps right now, but just to be able to reach one person, and that's why we're all here. And I'm sorry that that you had to go through all of that to get where you are now on that end, but on this end, I'm so grateful that you are where you are now. And same with Megan and myself. And I just wanted to touch on something that Megan had said that was so true, and such a barrier for me was being able to have the same therapist, through different kinds of methods of therapy. But here was my plight, being, a very poverty-stricken, addicted, even before addiction, just needing help. Here was my plight was, I would go in, and often when I finally could get on the Oregon Health Plan and could get to the mental health office, most often when you rely on the county, the county mental health places, and I'm please don't think that I'm bad mouthing. I'm just trying to say this so that a change could potentially be made. But what often I ran into was I often never got the same person. And so I don't want to come back in here in my 1 hour allotted time slot and try to break it down for you.
Right.
I just want the person I've already broken it down to be able to relieve some of the shit that's going on in here today.
Right.
Right. And so that was a huge thing for me, and then even I finally got an amazing mental health prescribing, psychiatrist. And then he, without zip of a notice, he was on to better things. And then I was here with this person that I wasn't vibing with in any way, shape, or form. And so and that was as a grown woman. Like, it's even more traumatic for children, in my personal opinion, to have consistency with these people, these counselors, school counselors, wherever they're coming across with these, because most of them are lacking consistency in their life anyway, so I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. And on a positive note, it did take me not quite as long as Christina, but it took me 6 years to find the right combination of medication for myself. And dosages, and 6 years and 6 hell-ridden, treacherous years. And my bipolar 2 is still here, and it's still around, and I'm still depressed, and I still have PTSD and stuff. But I found I'm 3 years clean and sober. The other day I had 3 years, but anyway, I find that my manics are like so separated out so much further than they've ever been. Like, they still happen, and they still are really bad for the the 4 days that they do last. But I'm grateful that they don't last as long. And so, and all of that hell to get the right stuff, it wasn't for nothing, because now I am on the right one, and I do feel better. But a lot of the road from hell to here was unnecessary.
Yeah.
It really was.
Well, let's
Go
talk
ahead.
more. Let's talk more, a little bit more about that. And again, it's not about trying to beat up the system. What it's
Right.
about is looking for opportunities for improvement. And Christina, curious, would you talk with, I mean, I know you've already kind of gone into, it's hard to talk about the good without talking about what's been
Exactly.
not helpful, but
Yeah.
are there other things too that you would like to point out that were not helpful that
Yes.
we should, okay, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So first and foremost, one major unhelpful thing is what we've already discussed, not having access to care. It's absurd to me that in this country, even if you have health insurance, you still can't get help.
Mm.
It's been an ongoing battle for me to find a psychiatrist that will take Medicare. I mean, and it just seems kind of wrong to me. Another example of something not very helpful, but severely traumatizing was when I was first in restraints and ignored at the hospital. I called out for help for hours, to the extent that I lost my voice. I didn't know where I was. I was tied up in restraints. I thought I was going to be raped or murdered. I had no idea where I was. And if someone in that hospital, just one person, had shown some compassion, come into my room, tell me why I'm there, tell me why I'm tied up, that would have really eased my suffering. But that is not what happened. Another example of something unhelpful was a clinic that I found back in 2013. This was after my longtime psychiatrist had passed away. So I was scrambling to find another provider, again, stressing, couldn't find one provider in my city that would take Medicare. So I finally found this clinic called Northwest Mental Health. And that's not its real name, but it's what I call it in the book. And it was my only option because nowhere else would accept my Medicare. So I had to go to this clinic. It was cold and impersonal. They rarely returned phone calls. They only saw patients every 3 months, and they just didn't seem to care very much. And an actual practitioner at that clinic made such a big medication mistake that it would trigger my last relapse, and it would ruin my life for almost 3 years.
Wow.
So clinics like that are not helpful, and I'd like to see it shut down personally.
Wow. It shut down, and some's got to be in its place though, right? I mean, that's the only one.
Well, it's the only clinic that I found in my city that will accept Medicare.
Yeah.
There are more resources for people on Medicaid, but for some reason I don't qualify for Medicaid, even though it doesn't make any sense why I don't qualify for Medicaid, because I'm on Medicare.
Right.
And I've never been given a good answer as to why I don't qualify for Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a little more resources, at least in my area, for people on Medicaid. But if you have Medicare, you're screwed.
Wow. Yeah. And do you find at all that there's more help now? I mean, as an unintended, as a consequence, I guess, from the pandemic, or a happy accident from the pandemic, it seems like that there's more options, at least for some people, to be able to get remote care. Have you found that has impacted your options at all? Or is Medicare still really limiting?
Medicare is still really limiting. I have a psychiatrist now who lives up north and in the bigger city. And he accepts Medicare, and we do virtual visits. So I don't even see him in person. So that's really helpful. And he's been my psychiatrist for 2 or 3 years now. He's great.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Now this is, totally off too, but one of the things that I keep thinking of is, I will oftentimes tell kind of my horror stories about this, which I talked a little bit about earlier. And then I think about people who may be sitting there wondering, should I reach out? Should I try to get help myself? And Like I worry sometimes that I'm discouraging someone for reaching out for help. And like, I don't want to do that. I want
Right.
people to try. I just also want the system to do better.
Right. It needs to be better. And like, this is kind of going off the discussion guide, but
It's fine.
you know, I really dream of a day when the mental health system is rebuilt and evolves into a system with compassion, understanding, and education at its core. No one should ever have to suffer in restraints alone, terrified for their life, with no one in a hospital that cared enough to help. This stuff needs to be abolished. And I totally believe that it starts with these conversations.
Yeah. 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 I can't agree with you more, you know, and in fact, I keep feeling like people who struggle with all sorts of different mental health conditions, whether, you know, it's PTSD or bipolar 1 or schizophrenia, you know, whatever it is, that we are often, you know, times like othered or kind of, you know, set aside and not looked at as equals. And I'm like,
Well,
man,
no, we're not. And we're not. I've had so many experiences where I have not been treated like a human being.
right,
Thrown
right,
away like trash because they don't see us as real people. They
right,
see us having some sort of weakness of character or something, that it's
right,
not a medical condition.
right. Which is why for so long I never talked about what I go through and had to hide. And frankly, it got worse and worse because of trying to hide it, trying to be quote unquote normal, whatever the fuck that is.
Yeah.
And realize, you know, that just sent me further into isolation when I was struggling, which doubled down on how difficult that was. Started that the shame, like Noble, you talked about this early, that layers on top of it. If I can just feel when I have felt free, as I do now, to talk about my experiences, and others have the courage to talk about theirs too. I've discussed, you know, there are so many of us dealing with these same issues and afraid to talk about them, especially some 20 years ago when it was really, really taboo to talk about it. And so you feel, you know, worse and worse, and then have more negative impacts on your life. And so I feel like when we are able to open up, speak more freely about it, we actually heal more quickly. We also find that we're not so strange because every other person out there is dealing with some, you know, version, their own version of what we're talking about here too. And so, and for me, I don't know about y'all, but feeling less alone is really powerful.
It's priceless.
Yes. Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why this conversation is important to me, because the mental health and criminal justice systems has failed me.
Yeah.
And we got to change. We cannot keep treating people with mental health issues like animals or dogs or people that aren't even people.
Yeah.
Keeping someone in solitary confinement and stuff like that. It's not okay.
So you talked about a few things, compassion, right? Treating as like full human beings, right? Even if we're suffering,
right.
It doesn't mean we're weak. And in fact, my experience is those of us who suffer deeply, like each of us have, we are powerful, really amazing human beings. So quite the opposite of weak. So understanding the whole human, compassion. I'm thinking about what are other kind of ingredients that we need. Education.
Especially for law enforcement.
Okay. So that's what I was going to ask. Education for whom is it, and about what?
I think, I don't know. I think that maybe people who work in psych hospitals need more education, because I don't know, it's just really bizarre that they ignored me for so long. Well, I don't know.
Well, honestly, I think it's an interesting. So here's the last piece that I actually wrote about that I think is relevant here to this point is that there's this certain training. It seems like even I like mentioned the DSM and just thinking about how we think about mental health conditions.
Yes.
And there are some biological, chemical conditions by no means makes us less than or
Right.
something to be other and to really to be able to think about the whole person, especially once now that there are these amazing medications that allow you to your full self to come out.
Absolutely. I never
and
thought
not
that.
just the illness.
Yeah, I never thought that I would be normal again.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really was like, this is going to be the rest of my life. And when I took the Latuda, I was like, no way, it goes to a question that, or something you were saying earlier. I think it's taken me time to adjust to happiness because I haven't had it in so long. And also when I have been happy in the past, it's been ripped away and my whole life's been destroyed because of bipolar. And so I'm like nervous about the happiness because it's like, when is it going to be ripped away? When am I going to go to jail again or something like that, Well,
and that goes to that additional point that I was going to make too, because also those of us who have suffer with various mental health conditions because of trauma, because of violations against us by other people, or even by, horrible accidents, like my daughter's death. There's no fault of our own. But the failure of our social systems to come in to help ease that place, right? To help feel more confident in life, and that's a real thing. And the way I think that we have really looked at people who are suffering from those conditions as somehow being less than,
yes,
rather than looking at the society that has created those conditions in the first place.
yes,
And that's where the less than is. And my dream here, as we're dreaming a little bit, is that we actually find ways to make those changes, right? And that we take responsibility and for one another, and also hold offenders more accountable,
right,
and actually do take the steps to put our arms out for
right,
people who are suffering, to whether I know you or not, to make sure I have Narcan in my purse to, help, save that life, to, reach out to, to notice when somebody is struggling, and just check in and be willing to have those conversations with people so that we can rebuild that trust. And anyway, I got my soapbox there.
something that's would be ideal for me, and I don't know if it is policy at certain hospitals, but something very important to me and dear to my heart is that when someone is put in restraints for a mental health crisis, it'd be great if it was hospital policy to allow either a counselor, a family member, or a friend to come in and sit with that person while they're in restraints. That's a real important one to me. That would be great if hospitals were to do that.
Because, and
go ahead.
If they would actually reach out to not just rely on a family member,
right.
So allow it, and actually reach out to support system attempts to find out who an emergency contact might be, who somebody that you trust might be, and to call that person in to be there. I love that. Another thing that I was recently doing a project where I got to talk to somebody who provides mental health services for queer youth, youth and youth of color, and talking about how oftentimes in our society, the generational trauma, the just societal trauma, the way people are treated. I mean, there's some real newly resurfacing fears and threats to LGBTQ community members. And, that affects somebody's mental health as well. Like Nobly, you were talking to before, like, because there was something going on with me and no one, bothered to ask. They just assumed that I'm acting out and, I'm a bad, a quote unquote bad kid. And, if we could, and I love this person I was interviewing, he was saying, it's like, we really need to flip how we are thinking about mental health and mental health care, and helping to, for people who are suffering like that, to normalize it and to realize, oh, it's actually normal for you to be reacting this way to these horrible circumstances that you've been facing. And, oh, right. And, so people so you feel less of that, self-blame and shame and, all that stuff that comes up that, honestly, at least for me, it was hard for me to get to healing without, until I could get through that sense of shame. And so, and have a real clear sense that the stuff I've been through, it's absolutely normal, how I reacted.
It would actually be, I think, abnormal if you didn't have PTSD.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Just from everything,
Yeah, exactly. So that's my big dream is to flip the system on its head and to look for that, just the more whole system response. I know we're coming here to the end of our time, but let's maybe go around and see if there's any like kind of final dreams or wishes or those kind of key ingredients that we or any final points we each want to share about mental health, our experiences or recommendations for it, however you want to wrap up. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, great.
So a couple of dreams of mine would be that there was mental health court everywhere. Yes. And that the people like Christina and so many other that have been wrongfully treated during an arrest and in any other situations because of the severity of their untreated mental health or the episode that are in or whatever that may look like. There has to be things put in place, laws put in place and stuff to protect us, people with mental health disorders from getting all these legality and all these legal charges pressed against them. That is not okay. That is not okay. My dream is that is all wrapped up and taken care of and in supportive of the mental health. Truly do the research, truly understand what mental health is like. This is where the education piece comes in. Find out what you're talking about and make the laws according. And make mental health according and support people with mental health because it is a disease. It's not something that we choose. It is something that we have from various traumatic reasons and various reasons why. So that is a huge wish. And my wish is to have more free time so that I can be a volunteer hugger. And if I could, straight up, if I could, I would go to the psychiatric hospitals, I would go to the homeless shelters, and I would go to the mental health crisis centers, and I would hug the shit out of everybody that wanted one.
I love you so much, Nobly.
Straight up. I'm coming in hot and I'm hugging the shit out of everyone that I can because that's what we need. Some love, compassion, and fucking tenderness.
Yeah.
Mic drop. You getting me fired up. That's what's up. Sorry, it's your turn, Christina. That was boiling inside you.
You go, girl.
No, I would say I don't have a whole lot left to say about it, but it would be great if there was more funding for free clinics. Again, the mindset that we are real people who struggle with something medical, more access to care, more conversations like these.
Yeah.
It's just been a real shit show for me for a long time, and I would love to see things change. I really would. But again, I would like to see hospital policy change, so when people are in restraints, that they're not ignored. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think I have confidence in humanity, and I think that we can do better.
Yeah.
We can do better. This does not need to be occurring in 2023.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the 1800s, people who were insane were taken to sanitariums and chained up and all that. And I'm, definitely we've come further from that, but we still have a long way to go because there's a lot of cruelty in the system. And part of me, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm not really a big fan of Big Brother. But if we have to put hidden cameras in these hospitals to make sure people cave, then maybe we should do that temporarily. It's kind of, it's Big Brother, but I don't know what else to do to stop people from being treated like shit.
At this point, let's put all the ideas on the table, right? And one of the really great things, I think, it's thinking about the progress, right? These kinds of conversations really didn't happen 20 years ago. So the fact that we are able to now talk about these things, I think it does give the opportunity to make more of the improvement. So putting all these ideas out on the table, let's not censor any of them. Let's just put them out there and then think through, okay, well, how can we deal with, the unintended consequences that maybe come with those things, like the Big Brother part of it. But what you're looking for is that accountability, right? The responsibility. And ideally, we wouldn't have to go that far, right? Because people would, recognize their own burnout in their situations, or maybe there's more care for the caregivers, so they are able to maintain that compassion on a daily basis, right? Showing up or more support for bringing more people into that system, so that folks can take a day off because caregivers are human beings too, right?
Yeah.
And need to be able to stay home and take care of themselves when those things come up, so it doesn't negatively impact the people that they're supposed to be caring for. And yet, if you have not enough people to fill jobs, people are showing up and working just exhausted and not well cared for themselves, it's just not going to be good for anybody. So good stuff there. I'll just add my last little dream here for myself is that I know I could use continued access to emergency care, plus a consistent check-in. And by the way, the continued access to emergency care, I don't believe I'm in need of any imminent need of that, but it does me good knowing that's there should I stumble and fall, should something get triggered and I have a really rough day and feel like I just need that quick private conversation. I don't know. I mean, and who knows, circumstances change for people all the time, and just knowing that that's out there is a relief to me. Plus, to keep me from needing that emergency care is consistent check-in with a therapist or really a trauma-informed or trauma-experienced coach.
Exactly.
On a regular, at least on a monthly basis. For me, I need it to be in proper balance. Like, I live a full life, but if I was able to check in with somebody monthly, that that would really work well for me. And the consistent part is important because I don't want to have to re-explain myself. My story is complicated, and I don't want to have to spend several sessions just getting to the point where I can finally talk about it as what I need to talk about now.
Thank you.
Right. And then finally that I have enough money or insurance or an EAP coverage
or someone who will accept your insurance.
Or it's someone who will accept my insurance, someone who it works for me, right? Honestly, I think everybody, if you have insurance, everybody should accept that. I understand there's some barriers there. I actually want to have another episode on where we actually talk about that particular issue, because I think it's a biggie. And I'd like to talk with some providers about that and what's messed up on that end that providers don't take all insurance that's out there, because that's just, it's hard enough to find somebody that works for you, and then to know that they may not accept your insurance is I mean, it can be crushing to the person seeking help. And actually I just having some plain free care, because many of us don't and can't even afford insurance these days. So I don't think any of us should ever have to choose between that mental health care and eating well, paying for our housing needs, being connected to our own personal support systems and other things that are just basics. So so it seems like it shouldn't be a tall order, but it feels like it as I say it. So on that note, let's wrap up. Christina, thank you so much for being
having me.
Being so open and candid with your story and generous. And I do hope you'll come back.
I will. I'll be back.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. It was a pleasure to get to meet you and to have you on here, and I see you in the future, because we still have lots of stuff,
good conversations to have.
Conversations to have. So thank you.
And all y'all listening out there, know we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about hope. And how we find hope. I'm just really excited for that one. That one, by the way, is going to wrap up this first season of OnSurviving. So holy moly, I can't believe we're already there.
That's
but
exciting.
really excited to wrap up on that note. But for now, we will close with our first two medicines, water and laughter. And we will start with laughter. Nobali.
Okay, this is like dad joke goofiness, but what kind of cheese is my cheese?
What?
Nacho cheese. All right, we needed a good laugh after all the serious stuff.
For
and
real?
My partner.
I did promise I would also
drum roll.
I did promise I would also bring a dad joke today. And in fact, I brought 3 jokes, 2 short ones and a long one. You ready?
Okay. Yes.
Joke.
Okay. All righty.
Okay, I'm laughing really hard.
See?
Mission accomplished. Christina, do you have water? It's okay if you don't. Yeah.
Cheers. Water is life, my friends.
Yes.
Have a good night. Take care, everybody.
Take
Thanks
care
for
of
being with us.